We got one of the GOATs of this show coming on today. We got Brian Smith. We're talking about the rash of commitments. What does he think of Mason Posa, plus the offensive line commits? Rukeem Stroud, is that the type of cornerback Wisconsin has to recruit to close the gap with the elite schools? All that and more on a locked and loaded Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, for being part of the community that we're building. I say it a lot, but I mean it a lot. I appreciate all y'all so much. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download that app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off over at Game Time. Okay, let us get Brian Smith in. We have commitments to talk about. We got people to talk about. We have a list, but I actually want to start here, and I didn't mention this to you, but I know you know this player, so you're not going to. Byron Louis, the running back out of Florida, American heritage, took an official visit to Wisconsin. I know we've texted back and forth a little bit. Any feel on him and where he maybe ends up?
That one has changed about 90 times. Florida State and Miami have always felt good about it, but then he took the Wisconsin visit. Why he hasn't committed to one of those two schools, to me, is pretty simple. They both have loaded running back rooms. As crazy as it is, Wisconsin's running back room, which is usually pretty good, probably doesn't have as many good players. So I don't know where he's going to end up because he's taken a long time to decide, because it's always felt like FSU or Miami. But now that he's taken the visit to Wisconsin, I haven't spoken to him since. We'll see. But, it's just a weird recruitment. He's known those two programs forever. So what's taking so long?
Do you find it interesting? It feels like in this, there is such a thing as token visits in recruiting. This doesn't feel like a token visit for a kid from Florida with those type of offers to go up to Wisconsin, unless there's legit interest there.
They've done a pretty good job of recruiting the state of Florida since this current Wisconsin staff took over. I don't think so, because he set that visit fairly early, and it's the one out-of-state school, I think, unless there's somebody else I don't know about, that he's going to visit. And he had a bunch of SEC, ACC offers. He could have taken trips to other places and didn't. So Wisconsin, they just earned it. That's the way you have to go. If you're going to get over the hump and be a program that can get to the playoff, those are the kind of kids you got to find a way to get.
Give me the quick read on his game. Anybody he might remind you of? What kind of running back is he?
He's a 3-down back, 200 pounds, maybe 205, kind of fluctuates in that area. Plays at a tremendous high school football program in American heritage. They have NFL players come through that program on a yearly basis. That's a kid they kind of load up like, this is our guy. And they right now probably have 15, give or take, Power 5 kids on their roster, which, by the way, is probably about as many as the state as Wisconsin has in a given year. It's just true. But he's their guy. And he's the one they count on in clutch moments, because he can catch, he can run, he can block. He's a complete football player.
Yeah, we're excited for him, man. We're hopeful. I'm ready to be hurt again in recruiting, as I always am. All right, let's flip it. Mason Posa, you and I have touched on him before, but I want to talk a little bit more about him. He's committing tomorrow. It's basically down to Wisconsin and Oregon is all the buzz. 4-star composite linebacker out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, 6'3", about 235, 240. What were your thoughts on Posa?
He's a train wreck waiting to happen, a very physical player, downhill. Can move pretty well laterally, though. I don't know what position or positions that Posa will play long-term, because I'm not sure what his growth plates are like and what he's going to do, because he looks the part, but could he get a little bigger and be a D lineman? Sure. Could he just be a stand-up edge? Possibly. But I think he runs well enough to play linebacker too. So I don't know what Wisconsin plans to do with him in terms of one position if they get him, because, again, they're hard to kind of figure out. They run a multiple defense from play to play. It's very complex. So they might move him around. But the thing I do know is wherever he goes, he hits people. So that's the kind of guy you want on your football team.
One of the comments I was making to somebody who watches the show a lot, you're looking at we just talked about Byron Louis. You're in a recruiting battle potentially with Florida State, Miami. You're looking at Posa. You're in a battle with Oregon. He also had an official visit to Texas A&M that he canceled. These feel like the battles Wisconsin has to be in. You've mentioned that before, but they've upped their battle tier. I guess I don't know how to say that.
It's part of the process. When Bill McCartney was building Colorado, the first 4 years, they sucked. But he just kept recruiting the elite kids, and selling Boulder is not really difficult. It's a beautiful place, but they had to go get kids that fit their program, and they had taken 3-star kids, slowly kept building, and it was just effort. I sense a little bit of that with Wisconsin. It's never going to be easy to sell Madison to a Southern kid. I don't care if they win 80 games in a row. It's going to be hard because the culture is so different. But you at least have to get them on campus for me to feel like there's improvement. And they've done that. The official visit list this year is better than last. It's not really that debatable. And at the same time, they're closing on some good kids. I mean, we're going to go over some more of them, but there's nobody on this list I look at and I go, man, this kid, man, he's terrible. Like, he can't help them. There were a few kids they took last year that I don't think are going to play much, like in an Ohio State game or whatever, make an impact. That's the bottom line. Every kid, can they help us improve the gap against Ohio State? That's the only question that matters. I know that's not friendly, but it's just true. This is a bottom line business. So, like, they just got the kid they flipped. I think he was at Minnesota, committed the defensive lineman or whatever. Like, they can't lose in-state D linemen. I'm going to yell at you for their D-line recruiting a little bit later in the show anyway, but they can't lose the local kids too. So they're doing a little bit of everything, recruiting all over. I mean, kid from New Mexico, kid from Florida, they're doing all they can.
Let's wrap this one up on Post really quick. Obviously not playing at the highest level of competition in New Mexico. And you can see some of that on film, right? Like, he's covering slot receivers down the seam. You're not going to be doing that if you were in Texas or Florida. No. So, but your point is correct. Like, the physical tools are there, and the offer list backs up the physical tools. When you see Oregon and Texas A&M and Wisconsin and others in on him, how do you look at players like that, knowing that level of competition isn't quite up to that standard?
It's very difficult to do a long-term projection because the only question that matters is, how does this kid adjust when the first time he's in practice, whatever school he picks, he's in coverage and he gets smoked? And I mean, he gets completely YouTubed, and it will happen. Some of those kids can't handle that. The stuff from above the shoulder is where the evaluation ends, because the human mind is the most difficult thing in the world to evaluate anyway. We don't know. Only thing I can do is tell you what he does physically. Because, like, right now, there are parents in the stands on the other team that are like, I do not want my kid running into him. Like, he's so much better than everybody else on the field. He wouldn't even be the best player on the field in a lot of games in Florida and Texas and stuff. And that would make him better, help him get to the next level. But, you know, he lives in New Mexico. It is what it is. So I'm just guessing, and anybody else is too. And I've had conversations with Andrew Ivins and John Garcia, all these guys that do rankings around the industry. They are the hardest evals because you're guessing.
That's super interesting. Let's shift to Rukeem Stroud, who did commit to the Badgers. You and I have talked about his game before, so I don't necessarily want to just recap his game for the second time. I want to ask, is that the type of cornerback Wisconsin needs to recruit to close that gap that we talk about to Ohio State? Or is there another tier above that they still need to get to?
A little of both. This is kind of awkward to say because Stroud is a kid that is not physically developed yet in terms of how thick he's going to get, how much muscle he's going to gain and all that. But he's a track kid. He's a Florida player. I know the program well at Tech. Those kids are scrapping and scrounging to make it in general. He's going to come in with a chip on his shoulder. That's similar to what they did at Cincinnati. With that stated, to put things in perspective, again, who's the program that the only comparison that matters? It's Ohio State. You know what they have in their class right now? Not the number one corner in the country, the top 2 corners in the country. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. So I don't know what you can ask of because that's just not going to happen in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. The 2 kids they got, one of them's from Alabama and the other one's from Houston. It's not like they got some local kid. It's insane. So they're getting better, but at the same time, in some ways they need Ohio State to come down a notch. And the way Ohio State's spending NIL right now, that may not happen. Like they just went bananas. There's going to be a rubber meets the road point at some point for Wisconsin to take that final step. And it's going to be about the state allowing them to use NIL. Like it's a yes or no. I don't think that's on anybody like Fickle, but the elite kids, if you do not pay upfront NIL, it's really hard to even get in the race, let alone sign them.
Well, let me ask you this then on Stroud, because again, we've talked about him, track kid, super long and lanky, long arms, ball skills. Yeah. I feel, but to your point, he's like a $165, right? He looks willing, but he needs to get bigger. It feels like that's the way Wisconsin has to go. They're going to get guys that have those physical tools, but we need to develop them in this area or that area, and that's how we're going to get to that Ohio State level, hopefully.
This is the kind of kid that Auburn has traditionally taken because they couldn't beat Alabama or Georgia, LSU. This is the kind of kid that Notre Dame did in the Holtz era, undersized, but a track kid from Florida. This is the kind of kid that Colorado, McCartney built the program in the 80s, early 90s at Colorado. Athletic, hungry, we'll coach him up. Again, track kids, you got to have that speed. You're playing against Ohio State. How does that end if you don't have track speed at corner? We've all seen it for every school that plays it badly. You must have elite corners. They're loading up there. So I don't think it's really that far off. There's more room for error at corner than there is at the position I'm going to yell at you about here in just a minute. And because either you're 250 or above or not, pretty much is like there are certain traits either you are or aren't, and there aren't as many of them. With the kids that can play corner, you can take a running back, a high school quarterback, et cetera, and move them. D-line is just a very small pocket. So Wisconsin is pretty much where they need to be. And they have an incredible track record with this group of producing DBs anyway. I'm not worried about DB. It would be nice to get a name offered. He's arguably the best corner in the country, committed to Ohio State. They need a guy like that, but they could develop one too. And their scheme is so complex. If the kids pick it up, they'll put up big numbers in their pass defense. I guarantee it.
Love hearing that, man. It is nice to see that quarterback recruiting step up after many years of the Badgers. I don't want to say scraping by, that's the wrong term, but feeling like we had room to grow there. All right, we're going to take a quick break, come back. We're going to talk some offensive linemen that pop for the Badgers. Davenport, Powell, get into those guys coming up next. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show over at Game Time. Listen, if you want to buy tickets, seasons are coming up, right? Cole Center, Camp Randall, you can get those tickets on Game Time. You're going to find the best tickets for the lowest prices, so you can sit next to your Badger brothers and sisters at prices that don't break the wallet. You get the best sight lines because you have pictures of the seats before you sit down, so there's no surprises, right? Recruiting's full of surprises. Not at Game Time, right? You just find the best tickets at the best prices. It's simple. It's fast. There's last-minute flash sales. And if you want music, comedy, theater, all that's available on Game Time too. So it's your one-stop destination. Not a bunch of different sites. Just go ahead, bookmark it. Go find your site. Go find your tickets. Pay the cheapest price you're going to get anywhere for entertainment over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDON. You're going to get $20 off. So you're going to save even more money. Download the Game Time app today. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. All right, let's get Brian back in. And again, the Badgers kind of, like a lot of schools do during official visit season, they kind of went on a bit of a heater there. There's prospects that we're not even going to get into today that we'll talk next cycle, our next show. But I really want to talk about these two offensive linemen. Logan Powell coming out of Arizona, 6'4", 280. You've talked about him a little bit before, but I want to expand on it now that he committed. What do you like about Powell's game?
I think he's pretty athletic. I don't know if he's going to play tackle or guard because he can play either, but I like how physical he is at the point of attack, and he can get outside and play in the screen game, etc. He's not a guy that's afraid to mix it up no matter where he's at. That kind of is symbolic of Wisconsin offensive linemen anyway, but he's a more athletic version, and I think he fits the spread better than what you would think of as a traditional Wisconsin offensive lineman. The 1998 version of Wisconsin's O-line would not work with this group of players are bringing in at the skill spots to best utilize them. So better in screen game, better in the opportunity to be in pass pro. So whether he lines up a guard or tackle, I don't care. He'll help Wisconsin with what they do today.
Yeah, and he also feels like you watch his film, and a lot of the questions you have when you watch maybe more raw high school offensive linemen, they don't show up as much for him. He's already 280. He plays with pretty good leverage. Like, he looks like he understands angles. He looks well coached.
That's a very good point. He's pretty flexible for a big fella, and he's not I don't want to just say waist bender. Like he's more than a knee bender that's athletic. Like, he can move laterally in ways that guys over 250 don't always do. He can get to blocks on the second level after a double team at the point of attack. He's got to take an angle to the linebacker who knows it's coming, who's trying to avoid him. He's athletic enough to make that last second push towards the guy to get there. He just is a good football player, and he's a good athlete. But he's probably good in track if he wanted to be, or basketball or anything. He could adjust. So that's the kind of kid you need. If you're going to compete with Ohio State and Michigan, et cetera, you better be good up front. And by the way, the transfer portal shows why recruiting high school linemen is important, because the portal was bare of good offensive linemen this past spring. Yeah,
no, that's a great point. And we're going to get a defensive line too, but look at the portal for defensive linemen, how crazy that is. You got to get them out of high school, both sides of the trenches.
Yeah, it's super. I'll explain that in a second, but it's bad.
It's super. Yeah, it's super competitive. All right, last one on Powell I wanted to get to quick. if you listen, any D1 high school lineman has offers to schools like Wisconsin has impressive physical film at the high school level. But a lot of them we talked about in Davenport, we're going to get into, there's 260, 250. It just has to make your job easier as an evaluator to see a guy like Powell who's already 280. There's not as much projection.
Well, there's truth in that. You have to assume kids are going to put on weight, but you just, again, that's an above the shoulders deal. Is he going to eat right? Is he going to take training right? How will he accept coaching? Those are all guesses. And those are also reasons why O-line projections are horrific, no matter how good you are at evaluating, because it's stuff you can't see on film. That'll never change. A quarterback, same deal. I can't tell you if the kid's going to read the playbooks, understand coverages. If that was the case, Jeff George would be the greatest quarterback ever. He might have the best arm ever. He was terrible. So you just have to look at it like you got to take as many of these kind of guys as you can. Who finishes at the top of the heap, good for them, but you don't know who it's going to be.
Well, speaking of offensive linemen, taking as many as you can, let's talk Nolan Davenport. So now we shift from kind of an interior, more well-built offensive lineman, probably with Powell. Davenport's about 6'6", 6'7", 260, pretty athletic on film. What do you think of with Nolan Davenport?
I love his film. He's a try-hard guy, but he's at Massillon, Washington, one of the most tradition-rich programs in the history of high school football in the United States. It's Northern Ohio. And he's a kid that takes his craft very seriously. It's outside play. He tries to get to the outside shoulder. Second level block, he takes a beeline to where he needs to be, not where the guy's at, but where he's going to meet him at. Like little things he's already started to pick up. And again, he's an athlete. He fits the mold of a kid that can play in a spread and be in screen. Like you have to throw a bazillion screens to make the spread work. Everybody does it. And how much your linemen hustle and how athletic they are often dictates whether that's a 3-yard or a 50-yard gain. He's the kind of kid that can get out there and get that last kick out block and spring one of your little fast running backs or receivers for a touchdown. So it's just something Wisconsin has not done, is take kids like this as often. And I know there's always good linemen in the Midwest and stuff like that, but this is not the normal Midwest lineman. They're usually a little bulkier, a little heavier. This kid's very athletic. I think he could play in about any scheme, like even Georgia's if you gave him some time to get bigger, but he's just a good football player from a great program. So it's a good pickup for the Badgers.
Well, and he's a former tight end, right? I think that's one of the things that when I was watching the film, you can see the footwork, you can see the athleticism.
Oh, yeah.
And it is pretty unique for his size. And, the other thing, when you watch him, I felt like his frame, it's a really good lean frame where it doesn't feel like he's a guy that's going to struggle to put on 40 pounds he needs.
I doubt it does. Like he probably won't play as a freshman, but as a redshirt freshman, he'll play in a couple games, special teams, whatever next year. But as a redshirt freshman, he'll compete for reps. And then as a junior, redshirt sophomore, he'll start. He's too athletic, especially again for their fit in their scheme for Wisconsin not to see him hit the field. They're not getting as many of these guys prior to the staff getting there. Like they didn't get many of these. So he's going to have a little easier path to move up the depth chart. He fits what they need.
Let me ask you this and finish on him, and then I want to get into the tight end, Nizy Davis. So Davenport is kind of a mid 3-star guy, and I made the comment when he committed, I feel like that's a little too low. Why is, with the athletic tools, the frame from the high school he's at, and I know recruiting rankings, we don't talk about him a ton because sometimes there's not a ton of rhyme and reason behind them, but why is he a mid 3-star guy, do you think?
It's hard to say. Part of it, he's from Northern Ohio, like, outside of Bill Kurowick, there aren't many guys in Ohio in that area that really scout. There's a few. Alan True, I think he lives in Michigan, et cetera. But he's not going to get scouted as much as the kids where I live, like Alabama, Georgia, Florida. Again, I've talked about that before. And then he's not already big. Like the guys last year that Georgia signed 6 offensive linemen, all of them were over 300 pounds. He's not a ready-made guy. So there's more projection. There's a little fear. But his upside is tremendous. So low floor, high ceiling is one way you could put it, but I think he's technical enough that that's not really fair, but he might be valued in that sense. But that's the only thing I can think is like the film is good. He runs well. He's athletic. He bends. He hustles. It's just size.
I love it. All right, we're going to take a quick break, come back and talk Nizy Davis and a little bit of defensive line recruiting. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second to say thank you. We really appreciate it. Also, a quick second to say today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the ultimate place to find all your talent, all your professional talent that you need as a business, as a company. Find the right talent over at LinkedIn because they're going to help you save time, save money, not make the mistakes of bringing the wrong people into your organization. Because at the backbone of every successful organization is people. And to get the right people, you have to find the right people. That's what LinkedIn is here to help you do. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions do apply. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Find the best available talent out there. Save time, which saves you money over at LinkedIn. It's something my company uses. It's something I use over at LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Let's get Brian back in. Last comment we're going to talk about today. And again, Jameer Washington's going to be a future show, but also committed a 6'2" cornerback. I want to talk to you about Nyzie Davis, the 6'5" tight end out of Indianapolis. Unique skill set, man. Big, long, can catch. Shows some physicality blocking, at least the willingness to do it. What do you think of his game?
He's a unique player because there's still some projection, but he has the athleticism to run that seam route. He's a guy that could run a corner and jump up over a DB and make a play. Not many tight ends get down the field like he does. Is he physically ready to take on a Michigan defensive end? Maybe not yet, but in a year or so he will be. To be honest, athletic guys like this are kind of in vogue. Some hit, some don't. But if you're 215-ish and you can run and catch, they're going to at least give you a shot because those tight ends, look at what Georgia did with tight ends the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Miami and Notre Dame historically have done. Well, Wisconsin's had a few of them. Iowa, obviously. It's a pain to guard them in the slot because there's nobody that's going to match up overall with them. This is the kind of guy they need if they're going to compete with Michigan, et cetera. You got to find your own matchup problem for the other team to offset. Like, they're never going to out-recruit Ohio State at receiver. I get it. But there's other ways to get there to the end zone. This is one way to do it. No DB is going to cover a 6'4" guy that weighs 230, 235. They shouldn't win 50-50 balls with him. This kid's the kind of guy that can make those plays. I'm a little surprised he wasn't a little higher recruited because he's in Indianapolis. It's a pretty good football city. So Wisconsin got a steal.
Does he remind you of anybody? I felt like he, and you brought up one of the schools. I felt like he reminded me a tiny bit of Noah Fant. If you remember the Iowa tight end.
Iowa's had some guys that were a little smaller and they built up.
Mm-hmm.
A certain guy that's in San Francisco was 200 pounds when he enrolled in Iowa, which is bizarre.
That's
a whole nother,
yeah.
That's a whole nother well, like that's insane. But he's not that much bigger. And if you're going to look at projections, this is an effort thing. If you're 200 pounds and end up at 250, 260 in the NFL, obviously your effort's elite. How much does this kid want it? Does he want to be, okay, I made it to Wisconsin, or does he want to be an all Big Ten player? Or does he want to get drafted? Like, this is just the effort because the athleticism and the physical traits to frame are there to weigh 250 and be a first or second round pick. There's a ton of guys like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now do you develop into it? It's all the stuff I can't tell you about because he's not a finished product. If there is a true boomer bust out of the commitments, this kid is it. He could be elite or he may not even start.
Yeah, that's a great point because there are a ton of guys with those type of physical attributes that just don't make it. And
100%.
All right, let's talk defensive line recruiting. What's your vibe there?
It's awful. They got the kid in state. That's good news.
Mm-hmm.
But we've talked about a couple of times, they got to get some of these other kids that they're just not getting. And I'm like, look, like the kid from New Jersey committed to Tennessee.
They were in on it.
And like at some point, all these other spots are great and they're improving their roster. When was the last time Wisconsin got a kid at D tackle that you were super excited about?
Oh, so I'll give you one. I'll give you last year. We were pretty excited about Ernest Willer.
He's an edge, though. Like,
yeah, he's more of a he's
Ernest is good. That's why I said tackle. And I know Ernest. That's hell of football.
Yeah.
But they got to start getting guys that the other team's concerned about when he walks off the bus.
Right.
And right now they're not. And I know it's a big NIL thing, and that's something I'll get into. But like, I've been looking at some of these lists and some of these players, going through all these different teams. There's 2 or 3 themes here with the teams that are winning around college football that I talk about, and your fans get mad, but it's still true. The teams that are at the very top get the elite D linemen. It's the one complete separator from everybody else. And they're like, they hoard them. For example, Bama has it's either 3rd or 4th string. He was the number 1 or 2 player in the country a couple of years ago as an outside linebacker. He's 3rd or 4th string. And he's stand up. So he would be in a down 4-3, he'd be an edge. You have to get some of those kids. I forget the kid, Jalen something, he just committed to Tennessee. Mm-hmm. Not like a top 10 kid, but he can rush the passer. He's got some size. He took Tennessee has humongous NIL. I'm assuming he just took it. I'm keep bringing this back up because Wisconsin doesn't have the cachet that some other schools do. The only two that really don't use NIL that are successful, like up front that I know, are Penn State and Notre Dame. I know probably makes Wisconsin fans mad, but those schools can get away with it more. They have more cachet. They just do.
Mm-hmm.
Wisconsin's got to find a way to get over the hump at D-line. And I know they're trying because they've done a pretty good job recruiting. They got to get a couple of guys at SEC and Big Ten schools that are prominent programs, Notre Dame, SC, whatever, one. Checkbox. That's the final thing here. Because, like, overall, if you said, Brian, like, are they further along than you thought they would be in year two? It's absolutely. But D-line is so far behind everything else, it could hold them down because if it's 2nd down and 4 for the other team, it doesn't matter how many corners you have.
Right.
So I don't know how they fix this unless they change their NIL. Because I know Fickle can coach. That's proven. So it's just the players now. And there's no, to put it in perspective, Nick and Kirby, the two guys that are probably the best in the business the last couple of years, what position did they covet more than any other? D-line.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a problem. Like, I was going through the list. Okay, who did they get at D-line here? They got the kid from Wisconsin. That's good. That's huge. But now they got to get some and they didn't have anything on them. I'm like, oh boy. They better finish this month with at least one more dude up front on the D-line. They got to get them.
So they're in on a couple, but as of now, like, they were in on, I mean, they've been in on a couple that have gone elsewhere too. So you're totally right. Like, the defense line recruiting has to get better. And hopefully the next time I have you on, we're talking about maybe I know we talked about Wilnerson Telemuk. I forget. I mispronounced
the kid from Miami.
From Opelika. He's making a decision between Wisconsin and West Virginia pretty soon. So hopefully, like, that's, I think, coming up. So hopefully next time you're on, we can talk about at least somebody coming in on the defensive line. He is Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider, as always, also brought to you by LinkedIn at FBScout_Florida. Brian, as always, man, thank you for coming on and making us smarter.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
On Wisconsin, and we will talk later.